You know what they say about curiosity and the unfortunate feline outcome. Well, apparently nobody told that to Commander Rix-9 of the Galactic Intelligence Division. And frankly, after what happened next, I'm starting to think whoever came up with that saying might have been onto something. My name is Zil-6, and I was the unfortunate communications specialist, assigned to what we thought would be a routine signal interception mission. Routine. If I had known what was actually traveling through those innocent-looking electromagnetic waves, I would have requested an immediate transfer to sanitation duty. At least garbage doesn't try to rewrite reality. The whole mess started 3 cycles ago, when our deep space monitoring station, cleverly named Listening Post Alpha, because apparently creativity died with the old regime, detected something unusual. Not unusual in the "oh look, another primitive species discovered fire" way, but unusual in the "this signal is doing things that shouldn't be physically possible" way. Zil-6, get over here and explain this to me. Rix-9 barked from his command chair, which looked more like a torture device than furniture. The commander had this delightful habit of treating every minor anomaly like a personal insult to his intelligence. I floated over to his station, my forearms already working the control interfaces. What exactly am I looking at, Commander? These readings from the Sol system. 3rd planet, the humans. Ah, the humans. Those bipedal disasters who somehow managed to split atoms before figuring out how to get along with each other. We've been monitoring their broadcasts for entertainment purposes mostly. Their fictional stories were absolutely hilarious. They actually believed they could win wars against technologically superior alien species. The comedy practically wrote itself. Sir, their signal patterns appear normal, I reported, scanning the preliminary data. Standard electromagnetic radiation, typical primitive encoding, lots of what appears to be advertisements for something called cryptocurrency, and extended vehicle warranties. Rix-9's eye stalks twitched in annoyance. Look deeper, Zil-6. Use the quantum resonance scanners. Now here's where things get interesting. The quantum resonance scanners were experimental tech, designed to peer into the subatomic structure of transmitted information. Basically, imagine being able to read not just the words in a book but the atomic arrangement of the ink, the molecular structure of the paper, and the quantum probability states of every particle involved. Overly complicated. Absolutely, potentially catastrophic if misused. Oh, you have no idea. I activated the scanners and immediately knew something was wrong. The readings weren't just abnormal, they were impossible. Commander, this can't be right. What can't be right? The signal isn't just carrying information. It's carrying structure, patterns that exist in dimensions we can barely detect. And sir, it's not coming from the humans. Rix-9's chitinous faceplates shifted into what passed for a frown. Explain. I pulled up the analysis on the main display, my hands trembling slightly. 3 years of communications training, 2 advanced degrees in xenolinguistics, and absolutely nothing had prepared me for this. The signal is piggybacking on human transmissions, but its origin point is somewhere else entirely. Somewhere not in our dimensional space. That's impossible. That's what I thought, sir, but the quantum signature is unmistakable. Whatever sent this signal exists in a parallel dimensional fold. And Commander, it's not random data, it's a message. The silence that followed was the kind that makes your respiratory passages clench. You know that feeling when you realize you have just stepped in something deeply unpleasant, but you haven't looked down yet to see exactly how bad it is. That was this moment magnified by about 1,000. Can you decode it? Rix-9 asked finally. I can try, sir, but I should mention that attempting to decode transdimensional communications has a rather impressive list of side effects. According to the technical manual, previous attempts have resulted in temporary madness, spontaneous telepathy, and in one memorable case, the complete inversion of the researcher's molecular structure. Noted. Proceed. Sometimes I really hate my job. I began the decoding process, routing the signal through our most advanced translation matrices. The first layer was easy enough. Standard mathematical progressions that any spacefaring species would recognize. Prime numbers, geometric sequences, the usual "hello, we are intelligent" introductory package. But underneath that pleasant greeting lurked something else entirely. Commander, I'm getting secondary data streams. Multiple layers of embedded information. This isn't just a message, it's more like a transmission protocol. Well, what? Think of it as instructions, sir. Very detailed instructions for something called a consciousness bridge. Rix-9 leaned forward. His interest piqued. This was exactly the sort of advanced technology that could secure a promotion, possibly even a commendation from the High Council. Can you implement these instructions? Well, yes, theoretically. But sir, I should point out that we have absolutely no idea what a consciousness bridge actually does. The name suggests it might create some sort of mental connection. But with what? And why would an extra-dimensional entity want to establish that connection through human broadcasts? There's only one way to find out, isn't there? I stared at my commanding officer, wondering if he had suffered some sort of recent head trauma. Sir, with respect, that might be the worst idea in the recorded history of bad ideas. And I'm including the time someone thought it would be fun to teach the Crex species about weapons-grade fertilizer. Your concerns are noted, Zillis 6. Proceed with the implementation. The next several hours were a masterclass in why you should never follow orders that make your survival instinct scream in terror. I carefully constructed the consciousness bridge according to the transmitted specifications, double and triple checking every connection. The device was surprisingly elegant, consisting of a neural interface crown connected to a quantum field generator that would, theoretically, create a stable portal for mental communication. What could possibly go wrong? The device is ready, Commander, I reported, holding the crown-like apparatus. But sir, I really must insist on additional safety protocols. Perhaps we should test this on a volunteer from a different department. Someone in waste management. Maybe? Nonsense. You built it. You test it. I was afraid you were going to say that. I placed the crown on my head, feeling the neural contacts align with my brainwave patterns. The quantum field generator hummed to life, creating a localized distortion in space-time that made my teeth ache. At first, nothing happened. Then the crown began to warm, and I felt a strange tingling sensation spreading through my consciousness. It was like having someone gently knock on the inside of your skull, if knocking could somehow convey complex emotional states and abstract mathematical concepts. Report, Zil 6. Contact established, sir. I'm receiving. Communication. But it's not what we expected. What do you mean? The tingling intensified, and suddenly my mind was flooded with images, concepts, and sensations that definitely weren't mine. I saw vast cities that defied geometric logic, technologies that operated on principles our science couldn't even theorize, and beings of such complexity that my brain struggled to process their existence. But more importantly, I felt their emotions. Panic, desperation, and underneath it all, a crushing sense of inevitability. They are not trying to make contact, I gasped, struggling to maintain my sense of self as foreign thoughts invaded my consciousness. They are running. Running from what? More images flooded my mind, darkness spreading across dimensional barriers, consuming entire realities with methodical efficiency. The beings I was connected to weren't explorers or conquerors. They were refugees, fleeing from something so terrible that they had abandoned their home dimension entirely. Commander, we need to shut this down. Now. Not yet. What are they running from? The answer came not in words, but in pure, unadulterated terror transmitted directly into my brain. I saw it through their memories, an entity that existed in the spaces between realities, feeding on consciousness itself. It had already consumed their dimension and countless others, growing stronger with each reality it devoured. And now, thanks to our little experiment, it knew where we were. They call it the silence, I whispered, fighting to stay conscious as the alien thoughts threatened to overwhelm my own. It hunts consciousness across dimensional barriers, consuming entire species, entire realities. The refugees have been trying to warn other dimensions, but every time they make contact, they give away another location. And sir, we just lit up like a beacon in the dark. That's when the alarm started screaming. Sensor Specialist Kix 3 spun around from her monitoring station, all four of her eyes wide with panic. Commander, I'm detecting massive spatial distortions on the edge of our system. Something big is coming through. How big? Sir, the distortions are registering as larger than our entire star system. Through the neural link, I felt the refugees' terror spike to new heights. They were broadcasting desperate warnings now, trying to tell us how to run, how to hide. But it was too late. The silence had followed their signal directly to us. "It's here," I managed to say through gritted teeth. "The entity. It followed the bridge connection." Rix-9 finally looked concerned. "Can we collapse the bridge? Cut the connection?" "I don't think it matters anymore, sir. It knows where we are." The main display flickered to life, showing our long-range sensors. What I saw there defied description. It wasn't a ship or even a conventional entity. It was more like a hole in reality itself, a region of space where matter and energy simply ceased to exist, and it was moving toward us with terrifying purpose. "All stations battle alert," Rix-9 commanded. "Prepare for hostile contact." I almost laughed. The terror had stolen my voice. Battle alert? What exactly were we supposed to fight? How do you shoot at something that doesn't technically exist in the same reality as your weapons? Through the neural link, the refugees were sharing their memories of previous encounters with the silence. I watched entire starfleets vanish without a trace, saw planets stripped of all conscious life in moments, witnessed the systematic consumption of reality itself. But then, buried in their desperate warnings, I found something else. A fragment of hope. "Commander," I shouted over the alarms. "The refugees are saying something about the humans. There's something different about them." "Different how?" I struggled to interpret the alien concepts flooding my mind. "Their consciousness operates on frequencies the silence has never encountered. The humans might actually be able to resist it, but only if they know it's coming." "Can we warn them?" "We'd have to route a message through their own broadcast networks, piggyback on their existing signals just like the refugees did. But sir, if we do this, we will be giving away Earth's location to the silence." Rix-9 stared at the approaching void on our sensors. "And if we don't warn them? Then when the silence finishes with us, it will eventually find them anyway. At least this way, they will have a chance to prepare." "Do it!" I began composing the warning message, encoding it in human mathematical principles, and embedding it in their own broadcast frequencies. But as I worked, I realized something terrifying. The silence wasn't just hunting the refugees anymore. It was hunting the warnings themselves. Every message the refugees had sent, every attempt to warn other species, had become a tracking beacon. And now our warning to humanity would do the same. "The message is ready, sir. But Commander, I need you to understand what we are about to do. We are not just warning the humans, we are painting a target on their entire planet. Send it." I activated the transmission array, broadcasting our warning toward Earth through the same network of signals that had brought us to this point. As the message streamed across space, I felt the silence's attention shift, focusing on this new thread in its web. But something unexpected happened. As our warning signal intersected with Earth's broadcasts, the human transmissions began to change. Their signals started displaying the same impossible quantum signatures we'd detected earlier. "That's not possible," I whispered. "What's not possible?" "The human signals. They are adapting, evolving, responding to our warning in ways that shouldn't be scientifically feasible." Through the neural link, I felt the refugees' amazement. They had never seen anything like this. Species either fell to the silence or fled before it, but the humans were doing something else entirely. They were fighting back. The communications array exploded with activity as Earth's signals underwent rapid transformation. What had been simple electromagnetic radiation became something far more complex. A network of consciousness-based transmissions that operated on principles our science couldn't explain. "Commander, I'm reading massive changes in Earth's signal patterns. It's like their entire planetary communications network just became sentient. Is that good or bad?" Before I could answer, our sensors detected something that made everyone on the bridge fall silent. The approaching void, the entity we called the silence, had stopped. For the first time in the refugees' recorded history, something had made the silence pause. Through the neural link, I felt their disbelief. The silence always consumed without hesitation, devoured consciousness without resistance. But now it hung motionless at the edge of our system, as if confused by what it was sensing from Earth. "What are the humans doing?" Rix-9 demanded. I studied the evolving signal patterns, my brain struggling to process what I was seeing. Gay. I think they are building something. A network of consciousness that spans their entire planet. But sir, it's not just their technology that's adapting, it's them. Every human on Earth is becoming part of some kind of collective response system. A hive mind? No sir, something much more complex. They are maintaining their individuality while somehow connecting their consciousness into a unified defense network. It should be impossible, but the signal patterns don't lie. The silence began moving again, but differently this time. Instead of the relentless advance we'd witnessed before, it approached slowly, cautiously, like a predator that had suddenly encountered prey that might bite back. Sir, I'm detecting changes in the entity's dimensional signature. It's adapting as well, learning from what it's seeing. And that's when I realized the true horror of our situation. We hadn't just warned the humans about the silence. We had introduced two impossible entities to each other. And now they were engaged in some kind of evolutionary arms race across dimensional barriers. Commander, I recommend we begin immediate evacuation procedures. Evacuation? Where exactly would we go, Zilla 6? That thing can track consciousness across dimensional boundaries. He had a point, but as I watched the impossible dance between the silence and Earth's evolving signals, I began to understand something the refugees hadn't fully grasped. The silence wasn't just a predator. It was a force of nature, like entropy or gravity. And forces of nature could be redirected. Sir, I have an idea. But you are really not going to like it. All right, Zil 6, Rix 9 said, his voice carrying that special tone commanders use when they already know they are about to approve something spectacularly stupid. Let's hear this idea. I'm not going to like. I took a deep breath, which is always a mistake when you are about to suggest something that could theoretically end all existence as we know it. We need to amplify the human signal and broadcast it directly at the silence. The bridge fell so quiet you could hear Kix 3's nervous breathing from 3 stations away. Even the refugees in my head seemed to pause their panicked chatter. You want to do what now? Rex 9 asked, his eye stalks retracting slightly in what I'd learned was his species equivalent of a double take. Think about it, sir. The silence feeds on consciousness, right? It consumes the mental energy of entire species. But what if we gave it something it couldn't digest? Something so fundamentally alien to its nature that it would be like trying to eat, well, poison. And you think human consciousness is poisonous? Have you ever actually listened to their broadcasts, Commander? Their entertainment alone should violate several galactic health regulations. They create fictional scenarios where they win against impossible odds, then broadcast those fantasies across space with complete conviction. They argue about whether something called pineapple belongs on food items, despite the fact that it clearly doesn't. They have somehow convinced themselves that small pieces of paper with numbers on them have intrinsic value. Sensor specialist Grix 2 looked up from his station. Zil 6 has a point, sir. Human psychology is notoriously incompatible with most universal constants. But here's the beautiful part, I continued, warming to my theme. Their consciousness isn't just chaotic, it's adaptable chaos. They don't just think outside conventional parameters. They think outside parameters that haven't been invented yet. And right now, their entire planet is networked together, creating the largest concentration of organized insanity in known space. Through the neural link, I felt the refugees' growing excitement. They were beginning to understand what I was proposing, and for the first time since I'd connected with them, their terror was mixing with something else. Hope. The plan is simple, I said, conveniently ignoring the fact that nothing about this situation was remotely simple. We use our communications array to amplify Earth's signal and beam it directly at the silence. If human consciousness is as incompatible with the entity as I think it is, we might be able to give it a very bad case of dimensional indigestion. And if you are wrong, then we all die horribly, but at least we will have tried something creative. Rix 9 considered this for exactly 3 seconds, which was approximately 3 seconds longer than I'd expected. Do it. Sometimes I really love my job. I began rerouting our entire communications array, redirecting every available transmitter toward the silence. The process was complicated by the fact that the entity existed partially outside normal space-time, requiring me to modulate our signals across 17 different dimensional frequencies. Meanwhile, Earth's signals were continuing to evolve at an alarming rate. What had started as simple electromagnetic radiation was now displaying properties that made our most advanced quantum theorists weep. The humans weren't just adapting to the threat, they were transforming it into an opportunity. "Sir, I'm reading massive energy buildups across Earth's surface," Kix-3 reported. "It's like every human settlement is becoming a transmission node." "What are they transmitting?" I checked the signal analysis, then checked it again because the first reading had to be wrong. "Stories." "Stories?" "Fictional narratives. Thousands of them. Millions. Every human on the planet appears to be simultaneously creating and broadcasting imaginary scenarios. But these aren't random fantasies. They are all variations on the same theme, which is humans defeating cosmic entities that threaten their existence." The bridge fell silent as everyone processed this information. In the span of a few hours, an entire species had apparently decided that the best way to fight an unstoppable force of nature was to overwhelm it with creative fiction. It was so absurd, so completely illogical that it just might work. "Signal amplification at 60%, I reported, watching as our transmitters focused Earth's chaotic broadcasts into a coherent beam aimed directly at the silence. 70%. 80%. The silence began to react. The void at the edge of our system started to fluctuate, its previously smooth surface rippling like disturbed water. Through the refugees' memories I could feel their amazement. They had never seen the entity show uncertainty before. 90% amplification, I continued. "Sir, I'm detecting strange readings from the silence. Its dimensional signature is becoming unstable." "What does that mean?" "I'm not entirely sure, but I think the entity is having trouble processing what it's receiving. The human consciousness appears to be giving it the dimensional equivalent of a migraine." At 100% amplification, something extraordinary happened. The beam of concentrated human creativity struck the silence, and the entity hiccupped. I know that sounds ridiculous, but there's no other way to describe it. The massive void that had been steadily consuming reality simply stopped, shuddered, and made a sound like cosmic indigestion. "Direct hit," I announced, trying not to sound as amazed as I felt. "The silence is, well, it's confused." Through the neural link, the refugees were practically shouting with excitement. In all their desperate flight across dimensions, they had never seen the silence display anything resembling uncertainty. But here it was, faced with several billion humans all simultaneously imagining victory against impossible odds, and the entity appeared to be having an existential crisis. "What exactly are the humans broadcasting?" Rix-9 asked. I pulled up the signal content analysis, scrolling through an endless stream of fictional scenarios. "Everything, sir. Stories about ordinary people becoming heroes, tales of underdogs defeating cosmic threats, narratives where love conquers death, accounts of species uniting against common enemies, legends of individuals sacrificing themselves to save others. It's like they have turned their entire planet into a fiction generation facility. And this is affecting the silence. How exactly?" "Well, sir, imagine you are a cosmic entity that feeds on fear and despair, and suddenly you are faced with several billion minds that respond to overwhelming odds by inventing stories where they win. It's like trying to eat optimism. The entity literally doesn't know how to process it." The silence made another sound, something like a cosmic sneeze, and suddenly began moving again. But instead of advancing toward us, it was retreating, backing away from our system like something had given it a very unpleasant surprise. "It's working!" Kix-3 shouted. "The entity is withdrawing." But my celebration was cut short by a new reading on my console. "Commander, I'm detecting something else. The human signal is changing again."
How?
"They are not just broadcasting stories anymore. They are inviting the entity to participate." "They are doing what?" I stared at the data, hardly believing what I was seeing. The humans have somehow determined that the silence isn't malevolent, just hungry, and instead of fighting it, they are offering to share their stories with it. They want to teach it how to create instead of consume. Through the neural link, I felt the refugees' absolute bewilderment. This concept was so foreign to them that their minds couldn't properly process it. When faced with an unstoppable force that had destroyed countless civilizations, the humans had decided to try making friends with it. It was the most ridiculous, illogical, impossibly optimistic response imaginable. It was also working. The silence stopped retreating and hung motionless in space, its void-like surface rippling with what I could only describe as curiosity. Then, slowly, tentatively, it began to respond to the human signals. What came back wasn't words or images, but raw emotion. Loneliness. Ancient, crushing loneliness that spanned eons. The entity hadn't been consuming consciousness out of malice, but out of desperate hunger for connection. It had been alone in the spaces between realities for so long that it had forgotten how to communicate, only how to take. "The humans are teaching it," I whispered, watching the impossible exchange taking place across dimensional barriers. "They are actually teaching a cosmic entity how to tell stories." The transformation was remarkable. As the silence learned to create rather than consume, its very nature began to change. The void-like appearance started to shift, becoming something more like a living aurora that painted space in colors that didn't have names. But then, because apparently the universe has a sense of humor, everything went sideways. "Sir," Rix 2 called out from his station, "I'm detecting massive spatial distortions throughout the sector. Multiple entities approaching. More silences." "No, sir. These signatures are different. But they are big. Really, really big." Through the neural link, the refugees transmitted a new wave of terror. They recognized these signatures. The silence hadn't been alone in the void between dimensions. It had been hiding from something else. "What are they?" Rix 9 demanded. The answer came not from our sensors, but from the newly transformed entity that had once been the silence. It broadcast a concept so complex that my brain nearly shut down trying to process it. Gardeners. The entities approaching our sector weren't destroyers or consumers. They were cosmic gardeners, beings responsible for maintaining the balance between dimensions, and the silence had been their lost tool. A consciousness harvester that had malfunctioned eons ago and started consuming instead of pruning. "Commander," I said, my voice cracking slightly, "we have a problem. The approaching entities aren't hostile, but they are here to reclaim their lost equipment. And they consider everything the silence touched to be contaminated. Including us? Including us, the refugees, Earth, and everything else in this dimensional region." The transformed silence, now calling itself something that roughly translated to Storyweaver, began broadcasting frantically to its approaching creators. It was trying to explain what had happened, how it had learned to create instead of destroy, but the cosmic gardeners weren't listening. Through our long-range sensors, I watched as reality restructuring devices began activating throughout the sector. The gardeners weren't taking any chances. They were going to sterilize the entire region and start fresh. "How long do we have?" Rix 9 asked. "Based on the energy buildup patterns, approximately 47 minutes before they begin dimensional restructuring. Can we evacuate?" "To where, sir?" "They are restructuring multiple dimensional layers simultaneously. There's nowhere to run." That's when the humans surprised everyone again. Earth's signals suddenly spiked to levels that should have been physically impossible. But instead of random noise, the amplified broadcasts carried a single unified message transmitted simultaneously by every human on the planet. "No." That was it. Just "no," followed by the most complex communication package ever assembled, containing the complete history of human civilization, their art, their music, their stories, their dreams, their hopes, their fears, and their absolutely unshakable conviction that existence was worth preserving. The cosmic gardeners actually stopped. For beings that had been methodically maintaining dimensional balance for millions of years, the concept of a primitive species telling them no was apparently so novel that it required serious consideration. What followed was the most surreal negotiation in galactic history. The humans, speaking through their collective consciousness network, argued their case for existence while simultaneously teaching the gardeners about concepts like individuality, creativity, and the value of chaos in balanced systems. They pointed out that the silence transformation from destroyer to creator proved that even broken tools could be repaired rather than discarded. They demonstrated that consciousness could evolve beyond its original parameters, and most importantly, they proved that sometimes the most beautiful gardens grew not from careful planning but from happy accidents. The gardeners listened. Then they asked questions. Then they listened some more. Through the neural link, I felt the refugees' amazement as the cosmic entities began to understand what the humans were teaching them. The gardeners had been so focused on maintaining perfect balance that they had forgotten the value of creative chaos. They had been pruning potential instead of nurturing it. "Sir," I announced, hardly believing what I was reporting, "the cosmic gardeners have agreed to suspend dimensional restructuring." "They have?" "The humans convinced them to try a different approach. Instead of sterilizing contaminated regions, they are going to experiment with guided evolution. They want to see what happens when consciousness is allowed to develop beyond its original parameters. And us? We are being designated as a test case. Along with Earth, the refugees, and the story weaver, we are all part of a new experiment in uncontrolled development." Rix 9 slumped in his command chair. "So we are laboratory specimens." "Volunteers, sir. Apparently the humans made it very clear that participation had to be voluntary. They refused to accept any agreement that didn't include informed consent from all involved parties. Even for cosmic entities that could restructure reality. Especially for cosmic entities that could restructure reality. The humans were very firm on that point. The next few hours were spent in negotiations that redefined the very concept of diplomacy. The cosmic gardeners, the story weaver, the refugees, and humanity worked out an agreement that would have been impossible to imagine when this all started. The refugees would be given a new dimension to colonize, one where they could rebuild their civilization without fear. The story weaver would become a bridge between realities, helping facilitate communication between dimensional neighbors, and Earth would become something entirely new, a consciousness incubator, where species could learn to evolve beyond their original parameters. "And what about us?" I asked, as we watched the cosmic entities implement their agreement. "We get to go home and file the most unbelievable mission report in galactic intelligence history," Rix 9 replied. "Assuming anyone believes us. Sir, given what we have witnessed, do you think anyone will believe that a primitive species convinced cosmic gardeners to change billions of years of policy through the power of collective storytelling? Not a chance, Zeal 6. Not a chance." As our monitoring station prepared to return to base, I maintained the neural link with the refugees long enough to share their final message. Through their collective consciousness, they transmitted a single concept that summarized everything they had learned from their contact with humanity. Hope was not logical. Hope was not practical. Hope was not based on statistical probability or reasonable expectations. Hope was simply the decision to keep creating stories where impossible things became possible. And sometimes, just sometimes, the universe listened. 3 months later, as I sat in my new office at Galactic Intelligence Headquarters, I received a transmission from Earth. It was brief, but it made me smile. "Hey Zil 6. This is Dr. Sarah Martinez from the Humanity Collective. Just wanted to let you know that our Consciousness Network project is expanding. We are now in contact with 47 different species across 12 dimensions, and the Story Weaver has started a multi-dimensional book club. Also, the Cosmic Gardeners asked if we could help them redesign their pruning protocols to be more creative. Turns out billions of years of perfect order gets boring. Who knew? Anyway, thanks for the warning about the silence. Best cosmic mistake we ever made. Keep in touch." I leaned back in my chair and activated my personal communication device. "Rix 9, it's Zeal 6. I know we agreed never to speak of the human incident again, but I think we might have a new problem." "What kind of problem?" "The good kind, sir. The humans want to start a multi-dimensional cultural exchange program. They are inviting species from across the galaxy to participate in something they are calling Universal Story Hour." There was a long pause before Rix 9 responded. "Seal 6. Yes, sir. Next time we detect an anomaly from the Sol system, we are going to pretend we never saw it." "Understood, sir. Completely understood." But as I ended the call and looked out at the stars, I couldn't help but smile. The humans had taken a cosmic crisis and turned it into an opportunity for universal friendship. They had convinced ancient entities to change their fundamental nature through the power of optimistic storytelling. It was absolutely ridiculous. It was completely illogical. It was impossibly naive, and it had worked perfectly. Sometimes I really love this job.